der nächsten Zeit stehen zwei besondere Ereignisse für die jüdische Gemeinschaft an. Zum einen das Pessachfest, das an den Auszug aus Ägypten und aus der Sklaverei erinnert und den Exodus in das Heilige Land. Und zum anderen Yom haShoah, den Holocaust-Gedenktag, der in Israel stattfindet. An diesem Tag erklingen die Sirenen. Für einige Minuten steht das Land komplett still, auf eine sehr besondere und beeindruckende Weise. Im Kontext dieser zwei Ereignisse habe ich die Freude und die Ehre, mit Rabbiner Schudrich aus Polen, Warschau, zu sprechen. Er wurde in New York geboren als Sohn einer jüdisch-polnischen Emigrantenfamilie. Seit 2004 ist er Oberrabbiner von Polen und betreut die Gemeinden in Warschau und in Lodz. Als Europäische Janusz Korczak-Akademie haben wir auch eine sehr besondere Verbindung zur Stadt von Warschau, weil unser Namensgeber Janusz Korczak dort lebte und sein Werk und sein Leben den Kindern in seinen jüdischen und nicht-jüdischen Waisenhäusern gewidmet hat. So, Shalom, Rav Schudrich. Thank you very much for taking time today. I'm delighted to speak to you. I would like to ask you first maybe to give us a short introduction.
Okay, well, before we even get to numbers, it's important to understand who are the Jews of Poland today. September 1st, 1939, World War II begins. At that point, there are 3.5 million Jews in Poland, the heart, the soul of the Ashkenazi world. Only 5 years later, 90% of those Jews are dead, murdered by Germans and accomplices. That statement is so horrific, most people don't think, how many Polish Jews survived? 10% of 3.5 million still leaves about 350,000 Polish Jews alive after the Shoah. Where are they today? The vast majority of the Polish Jewish survivors opted to leave Poland in the 25 years after World War II. If you wanted to feel safe saying the statement, I am a Jew, it made good sense to leave post-Holocaust, Soviet-occupied communist Poland. And so the vast majority of the Jews left, not all the Jews left. And those that stayed mostly agreed with those that left, meaning stay Jewish, leave communist Poland. Stay in communist Poland, stop being Jewish. While a couple of 100,000 left, some tens of thousands stayed, and of that number, many gave up their Jewish identity, often not even telling their children and grandchildren. And so the deep, dark family secret stays a secret for 50 years, 1939 to 1989, the fall of communism. After almost 50 years of hiding, the not so young survivors are then confronted with the question, do I feel safe enough today to tell my children, grandchildren, friends, colleagues, neighbors that I'm really Jewish? Since 1989, thousands of Poles, and perhaps it's even some tens of thousands of Poles, have discovered they have Jewish roots. That's the story of the Jewish community today. And while maybe 5-6 years ago, we had 250 family members of the Warsaw Jewish community, today we have over 700. And this is not immigration. These are people who are here all the time, many of whom didn't even know 25 years ago that they were Jewish, or 30 years ago that they were Jewish. And some discovered even 2-3 years ago, and some even this year. So it's an ongoing process of people here discovering that they really have Jewish roots. And so it's the amazing story of the blessing of democracy. It's the story of Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishaker. What I like to say, there's an expression in Yiddish, it's hard to be Jewish. What I have found, it's also hard to stop being Jewish. And that somehow these people find their way back.
So what would you say, also in the context of Yom haShoah that we are going to commemorate next days, what are the challenges of the Polish Jewish community nowadays?
I would say in light of Yom haShoah, that the question is, what is the Jewish response to catastrophe? What is the Jewish response to Churban, destruction? The Jewish response is to rebuild, was to rebuild Jewish education and to rebuild Jewish life. And therefore, if you can still find Jewish life in Poland, that is the ultimate response in some ways to the Shoah. The state of Israel is one response, very important. but the fact that people here are still finding their way back to the Jewish people is the ultimate Jewish response to the Shoah, to Churban, to destruction, because we don't die. And we are Ud Mutzal Me'esh. We are the ember that has been rescued from the fire. And that's what we are. But what are the challenges? The living challenges. Let's say one of the most important challenges is matchmaking, finding a good Jewish spouse for our young people and not so young people. It's a challenge of all small Jewish communities around the world. It's a challenge of large Jewish communities. It's sometimes I say jokingly, we need to make a new website called J-Datesky, it's J-Date plus ski for Polish. The wonderful thing about the challenge is that it's a challenge of life. When I started working here 30 years ago, every challenge was post-Holocaust, post-communist. Now we have a serious Jewish problem that is a challenge all over the world. That's also progress. The quality of your challenges, the quality of your problems.
Yes. So we are here to stay. We have the same message also in Germany. I think our two countries have this in common for sure. And also this same challenges to find Jewish partners and to create Jewish families for the future.
Yes, I would say that originally as a New Yorker, there's the song about if you could make it there, you can make it anywhere. And so I think when it comes to being Jewish, we could say that about Poland and Germany. If you could make it there, you can make it anywhere.
So how does your community or the Polish Jewish community support Holocaust survivors that still live nowadays?
Okay, first of all, the one major way is that we work together with the Claims Conference. That's true, for Jewish survivors around the world. And that's a very important source. And we're very grateful to Claims and everyone that works for Claims. And then we also have our own social work department here that we do, especially now during the pandemic, even before the pandemic, anyone that's homebound, we'd send lunch, a hot lunch 5 days a week. And today, basically all the elderly are homebound. So it's really increased the work of our social work department and our volunteers, and they're fantastic people.
Mm-hmm. Are children and the younger generation also involved in the charity and support system?
Okay, so absolutely. When I said we grew from about 250 families to over 700, the median age probably dropped from 65 to maybe 40, 45. It's really the young people that are coming out to join. In addition, with our kosher food pantry, we also have done something. There are kosher food pantries all over the world, and that's wonderful. But we've done something I think unusual. Is I said that we also need to send to all the Chasidei Umot Ha'olam, the righteous Gentiles, those non-Jews who saved Jews during the war, risked their lives to save Jews. And there are about 40 of them still alive in the Warsaw area. And so we also deliver to them.
That's great that you have connection. Yes.
And they are just amazing. If I could share one quick story, this is almost a year ago now. I went to visit the oldest rescuer, the oldest righteous Gentile, Chasid Umot Olam, 101 years old here in Warsaw. I went to visit her, and already in the pandemic, so with masks and gloves and everything. And I met her outside. She has a little porch, backyard, so I was able to meet her outside. And we were fortunate that I was trying to wait, what do you get 101-year-olds for a birthday? And a Mercedes is not really going to be very helpful. And so I thought something meaningful might be a personal letter from the President of Israel, Rivlin, and from the personal letter from President of Poland, President Duda. And I was lucky I was able to arrange it, and I brought it to her, and I read it to her, and we finished. She looked at me and she said, "What can I do for you now?"
Really beautiful story. About sharing stories, I heard that you have a very special story in your community. One of your members got reunited or found her family lost after the Shoah, or during the Shoah actually. Maybe you want to share a little bit of that interesting story?
Certainly. It's Eva from Poznan. And this also often happens that people hear stories in the family. There's somebody Jewish in the family. So Eva from Poznan heard stories. And so she started checking out. And then when DNA checking became much more available, much more common, she checked it and she actually found family in Israel. And they were able to find the link. And now she has a whole family she didn't know about. Her son is now going to go on Masa with his Jewish girlfriend that he met on Taglit. And I suspect they're going to make Aliyah. And a few days ago, Eva wrote to me asking she wants a bat mitzvah. She feels now that she's ready for it. She's not 12 years old. She's slightly older, a few times more than that. But she says now, and for me, that's a wonderful, it's really an authentic Jewish desire. And for a rabbi to hear that, there could be nothing better than that.
Absolutely. It's very touching. Okay. Yes, maybe some more words in the context of Pesach and the context of liberty and liberation, and maybe connecting that to the revival of Jewish life in Poland. Would you like to share some more thoughts, maybe?
The rabbis always understood that the Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt, was a historical event, clearly. But it was also something that repeated itself again and again. There are really two holidays that we see that have repeated itself many times in history. One is Purim, almost being destroyed and surviving, and the one of Pesach, leaving slavery. And the rabbis understood this both on a personal level and on a community level. We are always facing our experiences of slavery, whether it be the personal slavery of alcoholism, the personal slavery, my personal problem, workaholic. It's a problem of being a rabbi. It's quite common, but it's not a good thing. It's not healthy. And so Pesach is really a time for us to see what can we do to leave our personal slaveries, and also on a communal level, that we have gained our freedom, but it doesn't mean that we don't need to continue to fight for our freedom.
Especially in times of rising anti-Semitism, of course.
The rise of anti-Semitism, and the rise of neo-Nazis, the rise of undermining of the rule of law in several European countries, including here. And so freedom neglected is freedom lost. We gained our freedom, but we cannot neglect that we need to continue to fight for our freedom.
And that we can't take it for granted.
Never, never. And I'll just end with one other thought between the difference between chametz and matzah. Matzah is kind of our hero. It's our mentor during this holiday. And chametz, the leavened bread that we can absolutely not eat for these 8 days, it's kind of the enemy, the nemesis. And so the rabbis always like to find what does matzah represent? What does chametz represent? So matzah traditionally represents humility, humbleness. And chametz, this bread, is puffed out as arrogance. And if we look at what's the difference between chametz and matzah, actually, they both have two of the same letters. Matzah, chametz. They share the letters mem and tzadi. Only the difference is hey and chet. And for those that could read Hebrew, we know that the hey is, right, 10 seconds. I know this is an old-fashioned screen share.
Great, we can see it.
This is a hey, this is a chet. The difference between the hey and the chet is this little piece here. Just a little piece. The whole difference between chametz and matzah is just a little bit. The difference between humility and arrogance is just a little bit. And also, if you look, because the rabbis love to do gematria, the numerical value of each Hebrew letter. And because they share two letters, the numbers are going to be very close. And because hey and chet, hey is the value of 5, chet is the value of 8, they're also going to be. And matzah is 135, the value, if you add up all the letters, and chametz is 138. What the rabbis love to do is then to look for another word that has the same value. What else has the same value as matzah's 135 is the word kahal, community. When everybody behaves, reacts with some humility, you can build society. Humbleness brings kahal, kihila, community together. They have the same numerical value, 135. And what is chametz? Cholek, it's argument, like machlokes. When you're like chametz, what do you like? You're going to be arguing, dissenting, fighting. Cholek echad al hasheni, arguing one with the other. And the difference between community, building community, and dividing community is tiny. It's just that little line between the hey and the chet. It's just a little difference between 135 and 138. And so people should focus on just remembering the other, practicing humility just a little bit, and we can change the world. And that's the story of chametz and matzah.
Thank you very much. I have a bridge in mind to Janusz Korczak, our name giver and the pedagogue, doctor, and humanist from Warschau, who actually was a very humble person and stayed it until the end of his life. No arrogance there, and who also treated the children with this humbleness and with this respect. And I just connected this to what you said, also because he taught the children to stand up for themselves and to fight for their rights. And they had a children's parliament, and they learned to argue there and to respect each other. So I find this a very nice and fitting connection also to our Janusz Korczak Academy and community here. Right. Thank you.
Janusz Korczak was an amazing man, an amazing pedagogue, an amazing example of what it means to be a Jew, a human being. But there was another person in Warsaw who lived about 1.5 kilometers away from him, known as the Piaseczny Rebbe, the Eish Kodesh, and fascinating, coming from very different backgrounds, expressing their Judaism in very different ways. But the Piaseczny wrote in his writings very similar to Janusz Korczak. And I haven't been able to find anywhere that they actually met, but they only lived 1.5 kilometers apart from each other, because we know where Korczak orphanage is, we know where the Piaseczny Rebbe lived, and where his shtibel was. But it's so similar because this Piaseczny Rebbe also writes that if we don't empower the child, we will lose the child. If we don't let the child know it's not about listening to us, about them understanding. We are there to empower them, but they are the masters of their own fate. And it's exactly what Korczak was saying, just in a very different context. And I really wish that more people would now read the Piaseczny Rebbe, the Eish Kodesh, because it's amazing how similar their philosophy, their pedagogy was. And undoubtedly, they were growing from the same wellspring of thinking that was Warsaw Jewry before World War II.
I would like to ask you also from the point of view of a chief rabbi, what are, in your opinion, the next steps to take for the Jewish Polish community and your visions for the next years?
I think the most important thing I could say as the chief rabbi, that the future is in the hands of Polish Jews. The fact that I, born in America, am the chief rabbi was necessary 20 years ago. I'm looking forward to the time when we already have a few homegrown rabbis, that they will take over. But in the big picture, the future of Polish Jewry is now in the hands of Polish Jewry. It's no longer, as we were 30 years ago, really dependent upon World Jewry to help us. And World Jewry came through and did help us. From people like Ronald Lauder, Tad Toby, David Mitzner, Zygmunt Rolat, Shavei Israel. It was amazing. And we still need their help. But we're now becoming more and more independent. And that's what I see the future. I don't know what the future will be. But the future is now safe in the hands of active Jews of Poland today.
That's very good to hear. Thank you very much, Rav Schudrich. It was wonderful speaking to you, and I hope we have a next opportunity soon. Have a good day, and Chag Sameach, the Pesach, all the best to you and your community.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.